What's up, guys? This is Stephen MacDonald, and this is my new show, the Stevie Mac Sports Show. And on this episode, I want to talk about Michigan football and just how bad they're hurting here in the 2020 season. Now, anytime you get into a topic like this, I think it's always right to start at the top and kind of work your way down. So here, we're going to start with Jim Harbaugh and what I've seen from him so far over the past month or so. And really, he just looks checked out at this point. I don't know what it is. I don't know if these rumors about him going back to the NFL are true or not. Probably not, because we've been hearing them over the past 5 years or so now. But I don't know if they're true or not, or if they're just starting to get to him, or what, if they're just breaking down his focus. I don't know. But he just looks checked out. There's very little fire left in him on that sideline, and it's really starting to, I think, affect the play of his teams as they look very depleted of energy right now. And I think another thing you can look at too is his and his coaching staff's lack of ability to recruit and develop a solid quarterback. And a guy like Jake Rudock, who he came in with in 2015, doesn't really count, because Rudock was a 3 or 4 year starter at Iowa before transferring to Michigan. So you look at the guys like Brandon Peters, now maybe even adding Joe Milton to that group, and so many others, that Wilton Spade, another one, that just never really became a whole lot of anything. Like Wilton Spade's probably about as close as he's gotten back in 2016 in the season that he had. And we hear all the recruiting stories as well, things like him sleeping over at recruits' houses or climbing trees. Even I believe it was Isaiah Wilson said that he came on a recruiting visit to Wilson's house wearing his cleats into his parents' house, and he thought that that was really odd. So just some really interesting and bizarre recruiting stories that we've heard, but none of it really means much more than just these goofy stories that we hear if it doesn't turn into something on the field. And I think that right now you're seeing that it's not really turning into much on the field, as Michigan sits now 1-3 on the season in Big Ten play. And really, I think Harbaugh just at this point is almost going through the motions. There doesn't really seem like a ton of urgency for him and his coaching staff to win right now, even though I think there really should be, and that there really is an urgency to win right now, but you just don't get that feeling from them right now. And that's definitely something that I think that this coaching staff needs to work on, is that sense of urgency. And then when you look more specifically on offensive and defensive sides of the ball, you can start on offense at the quarterback position with a guy like Joe Milton. Definitely not what I think we all expected we'd see from him this year. Now, everybody was talking about, oh, he's, Cam Newton or Pat Mahomes or whoever. They made all these comparisons. I never really got into any of that. I was never about any of that, but to say he's even been decent, I think, would be a really big stretch at this point. And, I mentioned going through the motions with Jim Harbaugh. Joe Milton's a guy that right now looks like he's just going through the motions back there, standing in the pocket, but he doesn't really seem like he knows how to go through his progressions at all, where he's just pointing down his number one receiver. He's just staring them down from the minute he snaps the football. And it's gotten to a point where, if you remember back to the Indiana game a few weeks ago, I actually saw a report on Twitter saying that Joe Milton was actually pointing out the spots on the field where he was going to throw the ball to his receiver. So all the Indiana defensive backs had to do was run to said spot on the field and just wait for him to throw the football. I don't know if that was true or not, but that was just something that I had heard. And I mean, he just looks lost at times. Like, he doesn't really have a solid grasp mentally of this offense. And that's not the kind of look you want to see from your quarterback, who was in this system a year ago, backing up Shea Patterson. I mean, that's a bad look for Milton, and that's a bad look for the coaching staff as well, for not having him game ready from week one. And even to this point in the season, being 4 weeks in, still not looking like he's game ready at all, as he was pulled from last week's game against Wisconsin. And for a guy like Milton, you can't just rely on arm strength alone, which it looks like he was doing most of the time the past few weeks, but it also doesn't help that his tight ends weren't catching the ball either. There was a couple guys in that group that I'm not going to name specifically, but there's a couple guys there that have definitely had some issues this season for whatever reason with drops. Now you flip over to the defensive side of the ball, and this is where I could go on talking for an hour about this side of the ball, but I'm going to keep it short to just a couple minutes here and kind of give you the synopsis. But the cornerbacks have been absolute sieves on defense this year. Vincent Gray had a terrible game against MSU a few weeks ago, but definitely showed me something in coverage wise against Wisconsin. Had a couple nice plays on the ball then, although I only watched about the first half and then half the third quarter of that game until I turned it off. But from what I saw from him in the first half of that game, he looked like he started to kind of figure things out in coverage. But then you look at the other side, at the other corner position with Gamon Green, and it's just hard to watch right now. I mean, he's holding guys right from the snap of the ball, not even trying to defend these guys down the field. And when he's not holding his guy, his receiver's 5 yards downfield on him within 2 seconds. Like, I don't know what the problem is with Michigan's corners this year. And I think maybe part of it has to do with Amory Thomas not being there. Maybe he could have masked a lot of the problems that they're having in coverage right now. It's possible, but then again, he is only one guy. You can't put so much of that on just one guy not being there. And it also, again, it comes down to the coaching staff being able to bring these guys up to be able to play in this kind of position. It's that next man up mentality, and they just don't seem to have that right now on either side of the ball. And then this is, again, where I say when you're going to look at something like this, you have to start at the top. So when you talk about the defense, you have to talk about the guy who's calling the shots, and that's Don Brown. And really, I'm at the point where all I have to say now about Don Brown is just get him out of here. I don't care what it takes. I don't care what you have to do. UTSA fired their defensive coordinator at halftime last week. I don't care if that's what it takes. Just I cannot watch his defense bringing 7 guys constantly on blitzes every single down of every single defensive possession. That's not a defense. Your defense isn't just we're going to blitz every single play and hope that eventually it works, and then teams like Wisconsin are putting up 49 on you and having to take mercy on you because they don't want to score 100. Which Ryan Day, by the way, at the beginning of the year said he wanted to hang 100 on Michigan this year. And the way that this defense is playing, having given up 24 or more points in every game so far, I wouldn't be surprised if they got really close to it, seeing as how they scored 62 just 2 years ago. But then another thing that really bothers me about this Michigan defense is the fact that I read the other day that Michigan's defensive line has 1 sack in their last 3 games. And that's with Kwity Paye and Aiden Hutchinson. I know they've been out for the past week or two, but that's even including the game against Michigan State where they both played. They've had 1 sack in 3 games. So I think at this point, you really have to look at the defensive coaching staff and say, it's not working. Get Don Brown out of there. Get Sean Nua out of there. Get Mike Zordich out of there. Whoever's there on the defensive side of the ball, get them out of there, and let's just redo this thing and admit that the Don Brown experiment didn't work. And for most of the 4 years he's been here, it never worked. But I think when you look at 2020 as a whole, this team is actually starting to draw comparisons to the 2008 Rich Rod team and the Brady Hoke team of 2014. That's the levels of bad that this 2020 team is fast approaching. And I think when you really look at it, this team is not fundamentally sound at anything. Coverage? No. Passing? No. Their defensive line? No. There's not a whole tackling. There's not a whole lot that this team does. I mean, when you watch these linebackers tackle, they're not even attempting to wrap up. They're just lowering their shoulder and hoping the ball carrier goes down. Then he bounces off and goes for 5 more yards. I mean, this is a very, very bad look in year 6 of a Division I Power 5 program like Michigan to be as bad as they are in what we're seeing right now with this team. This is like code red levels of bad, and they really need to come out tonight against Rutgers on the road at 7:30 and just put it to them for 4 quarters. And I don't think that's going to happen, which is going to even further highlight the fact that this team is not very good. So that'll do it for this episode of the Stevie Mac Sports Show. Make sure to like, comment, and share on this post, and there will be much more coming over the next few weeks, especially on Anchor, as that is going to be the main platform for this new podcast. But that'll do it for me, guys. I'll talk to you later.